Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. Excited to get started on this first Samuel, and then later, maybe today, will be up to 2 Samuels.
Oh boy, I highly doubt that. Takes a
Mhm.
while to make a Samuel.
And we are sans Lilith today, as she is leading her huskies through the mountains to carry medicine to her mother or some such thing. I don't know what it is they do in Canada.
Yeah, right.
But any opening comments before we jump in?
I do have a question. What's up
Yeah.
with your camera?
Yeah, what's with all the mosquitoes over your head?
That's not a mosquito. That's
Very
his glory.
fuzzy.
You got a halo.
Yeah, I'm just wondering that
It's
too, because
covered.
it wasn't like that moments ago. So
No,
let's see if we
it
can
wasn't.
fix that.
Yes,
like,
I don't know
what-
what you did to fuck it up, but you did.
Yeah,
There you go. Now it works.
yeah, I'm not getting that.
And your
Interesting. All right.
your sound is a little bit off as well. It's not as crisp. as
Really?
it-
What's wrong with it?
I don't know.
Let me check. This is so exciting. Let's get.
Anyways,
the
while
audio.
Aaron checks that, yeah, we're getting into First Samuel today. We're gonna have the birth of Samuel, and then later on, I don't think we'll quite get to it today. We're gonna have the beginning of the Ark narrative, which is always a lot of fun to talk about. There are a lot of interesting stories associated with the Ark, that being the Ark of the Covenant, and a lot of people, because in those chapters where we first start like the Ark narrative proper, because Samuel's name doesn't even appear in those chapters, a lot of people are like, okay, maybe this is like a separate narrative that got like included as part of Samuel's story. Like there's already an existing Ark narrative that got placed in later. So, or not, maybe not necessarily placed in later, but kind of got combined with.
Well, I'm confused because we got 2 of them. We got one in Genesis 6, and then and I mean, how many boxes do we have stories about?
You know, a lot, man. Boxes are very popular. They're everywhere.
Okay.
And so who is reading today? Maybe our good friend Mark?
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see. So, First Samuel, right?
Yes.
Yep, First Samuel 1.
Okay.
Yeah, remember, only read 1 Samuel. Don't read 2 Samuels. We only want you to read one of them.
Ari, calm down.
He's already drunk.
Oh boy, you kind of have to be to read this. All right.
No, not really.
Okay, here we go. So, First Samuel. I'm going to be reading from the NRSV. So, all right. There was a certain man of Ramathaim, a Suphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Suph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Penina. Penina.
I'm already having trouble following this. The son of tofu, son of souffle.
Oh my God, Aaron, you're already pissing me off, are you?
So 2 wives, and we have children. Penina, who had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man used to go up year by year from his town to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. One day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife Penina and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival used to provoke her severely to irritate her, but because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore, Hannah wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why your heart is sad? Am I not here more? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow: O Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the mystery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a male child. Then I will set him before you as a Nazarite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine. But Hannah answered, No, my lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time. Then Eli answered, Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you've made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your sight. Then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I've asked him of the Lord. The man Elkanah and all his household went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, As soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and remain there forever. I will offer him as a Nazarite for all time. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Do what seems best to you. Wait until you've weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. She brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, Oh, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me the petition that I made to him. Therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. So she led him there for the Lord. That was the end of chapter 1.
So, a few things, right, to note. So, we have here. Oh, whoops. So the idea of barrenness, of course, comes back up, and it's treated in much a similar way as it was in like the patriarchal narratives, where this, like, the fact that she can't conceive was not initially seen as like a curse, but then her praying was what got her like this blessing to be able to conceive. And in some narratives, not being able to conceive is seen as a curse, especially if you were able to beforehand. So but the idea that God is like the one who gives people this ability to conceive is also here, just like it was in the patriarchal narratives. And I also do kind of love the insinuation that she was drunk while praying because he couldn't hear her might show you like the kind like a cultural theme of like, or maybe not a cultural theme, but it shows you like something cultural about how people prayed normally, like very much like out loud where everyone can be heard, as like that being the norm.
Up until Jesus changed everything, right?
Yeah, Jesus obviously was.
He had a
Yeah,
problem
you
with that.
used to be able to pray like the hypocrites do, out where everybody can see them.
Right, yeah.
I mean, unless you're in an evangelical church, then that doesn't count because everybody's praying out loud.
Yeah, to me, this chapter is interesting because of this. I think I mentioned it before with the whole like why is he the reason that he's given the name Samuel doesn't really make sense because of the like the pun seems to be more akin to appropriate for the name Shaul or Saul.
What
that
does
comes up
Samuel
in-
mean? I mean, something God, I'm guessing, and I'm
Yeah,
so
supposed
literally
to be asking
Samuel.
God, right?
Sham.
No.
Yeah, I mean Shmuel. It means like the name is composed of Sam or Sham and El. So it
Yeah,
means
it's more like the name of God or his name is God, and
yeah. I mean there are several interpretations to his name. Let me check.
Yeah,
real
'cause,
quick.
but it seems more to be like they were troubled. The early commentators were troubled by the apparent disconnect between the name Shmuel, which it seems to be based on name of God, and then the reason why she gave him that name, which is given for like I asked of God.
Well,
And the verb to ask is sha'al, which is more
Well,
similar to the name Saul.
yeah, but
Yeah.
others have traditionals have solved this by saying that you have other biblical characters that have names which do not correspond exactly to the given etymology, like Noach and Reuben. So
Right,
for
yeah.
some of them,
The-
it wasn't really an issue.
Yeah, the note.
Yeah, but you could
the note in
tell from the way
SPL.
that they had to talk about it that they saw a problem here, right? Rashi is like, and let me see, where is it? Where they gave him the name? Blah blah blah. Sorry. Which verse is it?
20.
20. Okay. So yeah. So so Rashi, for example, is like the name of God and a reference to the incident he was called for I requested Sha'al from him. So he changes it to be Shmuel to be like the one who is from God, because I asked of him, God gave him to me. So the name.
So there's
doesn't
no
mean the name.
relationship between Samael and Samuel
No.
because you're
It's different
pronouncing it.
letters.
Yeah, it's a
Shema.
samech
Letters.
in
Got
it's a samech in Samael, and in
Gotcha.
And in
Shmuel it's a shin.
ancient times, those would have been pronounced differently. They would have been seen as different consonants. And I think in Arabic, they still have that sound, or not necessarily that sound, but like the Proto-Semitic sound that it comes from. They kind of kept two different sounds. They might not be identical to Proto-Semitic sounds, but they have two sounds, while Hebrew has one sound for these two letters.
And to your point, Isaac, so Alter says that there's a small puzzlement in the Hebrew because it is the name Saul, Shaul, not Samuel, Shmuel, that means asked or lent. This has led some modern scholars to speculate that the story originally composed to explain the birth of Saul was transferred to Samuel. Perhaps because Saul's eventual unworthiness to reign made it questionable that he should merit a proper annunciation scene. But it must be said that the only evidence for this speculation is the seeming slippage of names here that could easily be explained as by the 13th century Hebrew commentator David Kimhi. If we assume Hannah is playing on two Hebrew words, Shamu Me'el, asked of God. In any case, biblical writers allowed themselves considerable license in etymologizing names.
Okay.
Yeah. The explanation makes sense as well, right? You could just read it. Like sh is like an adjective, like not an adjective. It's like a prefix that you attach to a word that means like that, and so it could be like that from God, like the one who is from God. So it's like I asked for him, and then this one was given to me. So he's frog. So
Yeah, I'm so confused
Yeah.
about so many different things. I mean, like,
yeah.
and they went and they worshipped. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
I think the word translated as worship means bow. Is like
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Hebrew means
Vayishtachu.
bowing.
No, it's Vaishtachavu. Vaishtachu is a singular.
Okay.
Is it?
And then we got a
literally
couple
means-
comments here. Pandora's Pinata offers £5 twice to make the same message and says, please don't make too much fun of Tomer or he'll get fed up and move to greener Galloway
Galois fields.
Galois fields?
Is that
Yeah,
a French pun.
yeah. No, it's a
math
mathematician.
pun, not a French pun.
Yeah, Galois fields are. It's a part of the entire theory called Galois theory. I personally don't like Galois theory, so for me, it's more like killing Galois fields.
Okay.
Nobody gets a joke. Okay.
Okay.
None of us
Is
are
it a
geeks.
math joke?
If killing fields, never mind.
Yes. And is it just a theory?
A game theory.
Well, mathematical theory is not the same thing as a scientific theory. I know that.
No, not really.
All right. Then Matt White says, Tomer, again, did you not have to be from Nazareth to be a Nazarite, Nazarene? Otherwise, you're just a dry,
No.
sparkling prophet.
No, it was like a certain like
You have to say from the
class,
region
yeah.
of
Status.
Nazareth.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have
I
to say
mean,
from the region of Nazareth. This is a joke,
Yeah.
basically like how what's it called again? Chardonnay from a specific region is called what's it called? The fancy wine that people have, the sparkling wine.
Champagne?
Champagne, yeah.
Must be from
If,
Champagne.
if Chardonnay that is grown in a specific Champagne region of France is called Champagne, otherwise it's just sparkling wine. Or Chardonnay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so people make
We
that
are-
into a joke about all different.
That joke was entirely too lofty for this lot.
I also
Let's
love
try
that it was a question for Tomer who didn't even get to answer it because everyone else
Yeah,
was.
exactly. I mean,
Sorry,
Isaac
sorry.
basically is like my secretary. He answers all the questions for me.
Okay, you hired someone.
Sorry,
I guess.
sorry.
Uh,
That was my hat.
Okay, so I'll start my commentary, but before that, I'll mention some of the sources that I use. So the traditionals are back from the Judges story. So the general commentaries include. I mean, I have to say I'm quite disappointed by the commentaries because two of them are from the 80s. One is the Anchor Bible commentary by McCarter Jr. Carl P. McCarter Jr. And the Word Biblical Commentary by Ralph Klein. All two of them are from the 80s. I have a Hebrew commentary by Bar-Efrat, which is from 96. Tsumura has a commentary, although it is a bit conservative. I think it's the better, I guess. It's very concise, I believe. Auld's commentary from Old Testament Library, which I am also disappointed because it's I didn't really enjoy it. I also have a commentary on the Targum given by a certain Van Staldeine Schulman, and I hope I pronounced it right. She's Dutch. Yeah.
Peter,
So yeah,
ask Peter if you pronounced it right.
yeah. I'll post it. I post the family name here, maybe because I've asked a Dutch person in the Discord about the name, and I hope I pronounced it right.
Van Staalduinen Sulman.
Is it a sh or is this a s?
Staalduinen
A s.
Sulman.
Yeah. Okay. So the other guy gave me a sh sound.
No,
the first
that's
one is sure. The second one is.
that's it. That's incorrect.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, now that we have that resolved, I think one of the issues with writing commentaries on like any singular book of the Deuteronomistic history is that you would have to do like the whole Deuteronomistic history treatment to it anyways. So like you could have like a commentary on it, but because it's still part of that greater narrative, it would require an even greater commentary to fully understand. So I feel like that might be like one of the big stumbling blocks for why there aren't a lot of commentaries published on like any singular book of the
Although
Deuteronomistic history.
Although there are some recent commentaries that I should mention. One by Walter Dietrich on Samuel, but it is in German. So in case you want to look it up, if you know German, there's also a recent a recent one by Marvin Sweeney from the New Cambridge Commentary, I guess.
Didn't
But
wait? Did Dietrich write that one around like 2000? Was that when that one was written?
no, I think it's in volumes.
Oh, okay.
What is it, Walter Dietrich?
Give me, help me out here. What is a Deuteronomistic history?
Wait,
How many
this is
books are dedicated to that?
6. So that's Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. That's the Deuteronomistic history. Yeah,
Right.
and that's a very general kind of outline, because like depending on how much of Deuteronomy should be included in that compilation is debated.
Good.
Yeah, and there's also one commentary by David Jobling, which I didn't include because from what I've read, it's very postmodern, and I didn't really want to get into that.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I'll start my commentary. First on verse 1, Ramatayim a Zuphite. The Masoretic text reads Ramatayim Tsofim, taking Tsofim to be a part of the place name. While this reading is attested in the Vulgate and is supported by traditional commentators and KJV, Septuagint has Ramatayim a Zuphite. Modern commentators generally see the MT as a case of lithography of the Mem in Tsofim, and so it meant it to read Ramatayim Tsofi. Peshitta has Hill of the Watchmen, reading Tsofim from the verb tsofe or tsafa. Targum has Rama of the pupils of the prophets, with Kimchi writing that a prophet is also called a tsofe, as in Hosea 9:7, Isaiah 21:6, and Ezekiel 3:17, etc. Likewise, Talmud Megillah 14a reads, Elkanah was one of the 200 prophets, Hebrew Tsofim, who prophesied on behalf of the Jewish people.
I mean, you just look at the verse and the fact that you have the name Tsuf in there as like their ancestor of that clan, it does make the most sense that the word Tsufim is referring to the clan name. Like this is the Ramatayim of the Tsufim, like the Tsufites.
Yeah.
Like that makes the most sense. And it's funny that because, you know, if you're a traditional commentator, you're not looking at what makes logical sense. You just trying to read it as literally as possible. And grammatically, it doesn't say that. Grammatically, it sounds like it's part of the place name. So they had to come up with their own etymology of what it means. It's interesting.
Yeah. Now on verse 2, Chana. Her name means grace or charming, which according to Klein and Auld reflects the fact that she was the loved one. Tsumura writes that Chana is the central figure in this chapter. He cites Carol Mayer's, quote, the narrative of Samuel's birth could just as well be called the Chana narrative, end quote.
Yeah. Is it true that this is probably the first major character that is like that their name has been used before?
What does that mean?
Like, as in, like, so far in the Bible, like from the beginning till now, we haven't had any like main characters with the same name as someone else that was a main character.
Yeah, main characters, I can't think of them. I can think of some minor characters. I could swear. I know that a couple of my minor characters had their names used multiple times.
Sleepy, happy, dopey.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah,
like it's such a common thing
minors.
for people to be named after their their relatives or their ancestors, but like there's no one in, like, you go from like Adam to Abraham all the way down to Moses and so on, and like there's no repetition of any names. And so either, culturally it was very different and people were very much into creating a new name for a person when they were born based on what was happening at the time, and like the idea of naming someone after who's dead or an ancestor like was unheard of, or this is an example of this is fiction. When you write fiction, you don't want to reuse a name that's already been used. Yeah, so I'm just wondering because we already had Chana is also the name of someone, right, who kills. Oh no, that's later. We haven't got to that yet. right? Did we
Um,
already have
we
the story of Hanan has 7 sons?
No,
When is that? What is that in Kings?
no, in this chapter, in this book. Sorry, I think chapter 2. I think we lost Isaac.
Yeah, looks like we did.
Yeah. Okay, I'll continue. On that same verse, Penina. Her name can mean either prolific or fecund by Klein, opaque according to Auld, the fruitful woman according to Tsumura, or coral according to Halot. Klein proposed that since Hannah is called Elkanah's first wife, quote unquote, he married Penina only in an attempt to produce an heir. On verse 3, Lord Almighty, in Hebrew, Yehovah Tsevaot. This is the first instance where this title for Yahweh appears in the Bible. The word Tsevaot could be seen as the plural for the word Tzava, which means army. Thus, Yehovah Tsevaot can mean he who creates the heavenly armies, according to McCarter. Bar-Efrat writes that Tsevaot can refer either to all of creation, seen in Genesis 2:1, or to the armies of Israel, Exodus 7:4. Klein notes that some interpret hosts as an intensive abstract plural, giving the title the meaning of Yahweh the Almighty. Tsumura notes Trygve Mettinger's opinion that the phrase refers to the heavenly king who sits on his cherubim throne in the temple, and that the notion of the Lord as king was seemingly current among the priests at Shiloh. He writes that this designation, quote, originated in connection with the meeting of religions in Canaan, end quote, and that the original form of the name was El Tsevaot. Tsumura, however, writes, quote, it is not easy to see exactly how and when this meeting, quote unquote, happened. Similarity of language and symbolism is not necessarily the result of a religious syncretism or influence, end quote. He writes that Mettinger's view is, quote, highly conjectural, end quote. On Eli, Chofni, and Pinchas, scholars generally see Chofni and Pinchas as Egyptian names. Klein writes that Chofni means tadpole and is, quote, a rare name unattested after the Middle Kingdom, end quote. Phineas means the black one and is more common, being the name of Aaron's grandson. Auld writes that Eli's name can be understood as cognate with Allah, which means highest. He also notes that since his sons are called Bnei Belial, sons of no use, in 2:12, it is possible that the author plays on this high name as if Eli has been miscreated out of Ya'al, to use or benefit. Bar-Efrat writes that the information that they were priests to Yahweh, quote unquote, has no relevance to Samuel's birth narrative, but it was brought here because the stories of Samuel and Eli's sons are intertwined, as seen in chapters 2 and 3. On verse 5, a double portion, in Hebrew, mana achat apayim. The exact meaning of apayim is uncertain. If read literally, apayim means noses or two noses. Tsumura favors this reading and following Barthélemy, reads the Masoretic text form as a technical term of the sacrificial ritual. Most traditional commentators like Kimchi, Gersonides, and Ditrani read apayim as panim, which means faces, i.e., a portion that when received results in kind faces, in Hebrew, besever panim yafot. Kimchi notes his father's, i.e., Joseph Kimchi's interpretation with anger, i.e., he gave her the portion with anger. Compare Vulgate, which reads one portion with sorrow, and Abravanel. Kara takes apayim to mean double portion, which is attested in Peshitta and is favored by Bar-Efrat. Septuagint has, he gave one portion because she did not have a child. However, Elkanah loved Hannah, etc., reading Ephes instead of apayim. This reading is favored by Klein, who renders still it was, but McCarter takes it as, quote, a corruption of the text identical to the Masoretic text, even after which the explanatory gloss arose, end quote, and instead conjectures a single portion equal to theirs. Targum and Auld read a choice portion. On verse 6, her rival kept provoking her. Kara writes that Penina provoked Hannah so that she won't eat. He writes that when Elkanah gave her a double portion, she said, quote, "It is enough for you to have one portion, for you are one and have no sons," end quote. Very insensitive. Tsumura writes that the plural marriage creates severe tensions in this family, much like that of Abraham in Genesis 16, verses 4 to 5. Peninnah torments Hannah for being childless, much like how Hagar despised the childless Sarah after Ishmael was born. But later, Sarah afflicts Hagar with her husband's approval. On verse 8, "Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" Hebrew Bible reads, "Am I not good for you than 10 sons?" Rashi writes that the 10 sons refer to the children Peninnah gave birth to. Kimchi, however, takes the number 10 to be a typological number, indicating multiple things, as seen in Leviticus 26:26 and Ecclesiastes 7:19. McCarter writes that Elkanah perhaps means, "Do I not treat you even better than would be appropriate if you had 10 sons?" On verses 9 through 10, Bar-Efrat comments, "Hannah's act indicate that Elkanah's words did not comfort her, since his love cannot compensate for the shame of barrenness. Lack of sons is considered a disgrace. Compare, for example, Rachel's words in Genesis 30:23. Her continued suffering and possibly Elkanah's words, while stemming from goodwill, can indicate his inability to deeply understand her emotional distress, and brings here to an act. She does not participate in the feast, as is apparent from verse 15 and 18, but waits in her spot until the end of the feast so to not hurt her relatives. After that, she goes to pray, whilst she is crying even more than before."
Hey, here, just as a side note here, you'd think that if Hannah was familiar with the story of Abraham and Sarah, that she would have maybe identified herself with the fact that Sarah was also barren for the majority of her life. And, you know, I'm just wondering, what do y'all think about that?
Well, this is where like there's a very good question that comes in. How much of that time period, or how much of those texts do they really know about? So, like, there could be this case of, did they just know about the traditions maybe, and were using them, or did they like have the text? Because it doesn't really seem like they had the text at this point, at least of the Torah, right? Because I mean, I think I think the Torah was actually written later, but later than this, I should say, the Deuteronomistic history. But the thing is, like, when there are references, like, you could note, like, okay, well, it seems like there's like some muted knowledge of these characters, or what they are representative of. So I feel like that's always a very good thing to keep in mind when reading text like this, is thinking, like, how much did they actually have access to?
Yeah.
Now on verse 11, no razor will ever be used on his head. Several traditional commentators like Rabbi Nehorai in Talmud Nazir 66a, Kara, Gersonides, and Ditrani wrote that this teaches that Samuel was a Nazirite. Moreover, Septuagint has the addition, "and wine and strong drink he shall not drink," one of the requirements of the Nazirite, as seen in Numbers 6:3. While Klein wrote that the Septuagint reading is, quote, "a correct but secondary interpretation," end quote, others like McCarter and Auld favor the Septuagint, noting that 4Q Samuel A appears to follow the Septuagint and has the addition Nazirite in verse 22. I think, Aaron, you're muted.
Yeah, a little
also the
confused
expression.
again. These people just like they prefer. So you've got this tradition. No razor will touch his head, which means that's the tradition held by those people. But you have these other people who decide, well, no, I favor this other way.
Yeah,
which-
because there are reasons. They don't just say this because they want to.
Well, I don't know, because apparently they do, because some of these comments are highly conjectural, as you said earlier.
Yeah, but that's like
That's
it's
kind of
possible
that's
that
part of the job of history.
Yeah.
Like honestly,
Yeah.
it seems to be that this is definitely
the further back you go, the harder it gets.
it definitely seems that this is a reference to being a Nazarite. So it's possible that what constituted a Nazarite changed over time. So maybe like the prohibition against wine was added later. But it's also possible that this version of the text is missing
Yeah.
the extra bit, because we already saw by the story of Samson, where they also said no razor should touch his head and he should have no wine.
Right.
So-
But the thing is, you kind of get like the no
Mm.
wine thing, right? Because like at least with Hannah herself, right? She's like accused of being drunk, and
Yeah.
she's like, no, I'm not. So like in a way, it's kind of connected where like maybe like the mother can't even have that stuff either.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and
And
I also
something
know
else. This is
Go on.
really the one and only occasion where we have a Nazarite in the Hebrew Bible. So that doesn't help much either, right? Are there any other cases of a Nazarite
Yeah.
other than John the Baptist, but in the New
Samson?
Testament?
Samson, yeah.
Samson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there
Yeah,
no one else
wasn't there
besides Samson
someone
and
like when
Eliyahu?
they were talking about the Nazarite vow, wasn't there like someone that was they like made
No,
like a quick example of
Eliyahu.
him or something? I forgot if the character was even named.
Can remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
It doesn't matter at all, but who's got the chirping birds?
Is
I
it
think
you?
Isaac.
You're the one with the birds, Arn.
I
Oh,
have one, and he
it's
doesn't.
probably
chirp,
me.
he
Yeah, it's
screams.
probably me. It's probably me.
Okay.
The urban
Yeah.
forest.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. On verse 15, deeply troubled, in Hebrew, kshat ruach, literally hard of spirit. This term appears only here in the Bible. Kimchi renders, my spirit has hardened upon me because of my multiple troubles. Some modern commentators take it metaphorically, like McCarter, who renders unfortunate, Klein renders persistent, Septuagint has hard of day, reading yom instead of ruach. Thus, Auld renders a bad day, woman. Vulgate has exceeding unhappy, Targum anguished of spirit, and Peshitta sad at heart. Yeah. On verse 17, go in peace. Tsumura comments, the expression go in peace marks, quote, a successful conclusion of negotiation or assurance that the request for a desired state of relationships had been granted, according to Donald J. Wiseman, end quote. It is noteworthy that Eli invokes here the blessing of the God of Israel, while Hannah prayed to and before the Lord of hosts, citing this intimate name of the covenant, Yahweh, quite frequently. The narrator seems to emphasize the personal and intimate relationship of Hannah and Elkanah with Yahweh in contrast with Eli's formal association with the cult of Yahweh. The word the request, shalatech, anticipates the wordplay in verses 27 forward. Robert P. Gordon notes that this is the only place in the Old Testament where a priest blesses an individual. On verse 19, the Lord remembered her. This is in line with Hannah's request that Yahweh will remember her in verse 11. Similarly, in Genesis 30:22, Yahweh remembers, quote unquote, Rachel. McCarter writes that in the religious terminology of Israelite and other West Semitic societies, remembering refers to, quote, the benevolent treatment of an individual or group by a god, often, as in this case, in response to a specific plea, end quote. Targum renders, and her memory went in before the Lord. On verse 20, Samuel, in Hebrew, Shmuel. Hannah explains that he is called Samuel because, quote, I asked Yahweh for him, in Hebrew, ki me Yehovah she'iltiv. It seems more appropriate to have it seems more appropriate to have called him Shaul, since there is no mem in she'iltiv. However, Kara and Gersonides note that other biblical characters have names which do not correspond exactly to their given etymology. For example, Noach's name is explained as Yenachamenu Mimasenu in Genesis 5:29, and Reuben's name is explained as Ra'a Yehovah Be'oni in Genesis 29:32. McCarter proposed that the original form of the name was probably Shimuhu Il. His name is El. Tsumura notes other suggestions: Shemu El, heard of God; Sheme'el, he who is from God; and Shemeuel, name of Shemuel, name of God, offered by Gesenius and Driver. He writes that the last U is, quote, most natural and does not require emendation, end quote. Bar-Efrat notes that some suggested that the story originally discussed Saul's birth, and later it was changed to Samuel's birth, but he writes that there is no basis for this claim. On verse 21, the annual sacrifice, in Hebrew Zevach HaYamim, literally the sacrifice of days. Auld notes that this term appears only in 1 Samuel and writes, quote, if the opening chapters represent a further extension of the book, then 121 and 219 may depend on the sacrifice set to claim David's attendance in 26, end quote. Vulgate has the solemn sacrifice, and Targum the sacrifice of the festival.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, is it annual? Like, was it a tradition to go up once a year? Or was the tradition to go 3 times a year?
Well, JPS has the annual sacrifice, but
Yeah.
I mean, the sacrifice of days sounds like something. And I mean, it's odd. It could refer to like something that is like specific
Yeah.
kind of sacrifice that is on annually, or it can just be a certain type of sacrifice.
Yeah, Steinsaltz is like, the appropriate offering for those dates. Perhaps the festival offering to the Lord.
Yeah. Let me check real quick.
Yes, the annual cycle of iterative actions invoked at the beginning is seemingly resumed, but everything is different now that Hannah has born a son, and she herself introduces a change in the repeated pattern. Yeah, I don't know. For some, I guess it looks like, unless I'm reading too far into it.
Tsumura renders it as the yearly sacrifice.
Yeah, the yearly sacrifice is how it's taken by Alter as well. And then he just says, "Oh yeah, we're back to the story." Like without, I mean, the thing is, when it comes to a lot of religious traditions, they have sacrifices for certain, days of the week, certain months, certain years, and I think there's also, I'm not sure how early this started, but there's also like a jubilee sacrifice, right? So like every 52, is it 52? No, 49. Sorry, every 49 years they would do like a bigger sacrifice, and it's talked about or a bigger offering. It's talked about in the Book of Jubilees, like at the end of that cycle. So depending on, because I'm not quite sure on exactly what the sacrifice was, but those kind of timed sacrifices were very common, basically across like all religions with sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Now on his vow, the story does not tell us of any vow that Elkanah made. Rashi wrote that this refers to vows Elkanah made between festivals. Other traditional commentators wrote that this refers to all his vows that he made throughout the year. McCarter notes that many scholars see his vow as secondary, but if so, why was this added? He writes that the reading of the Masoretic text is a vestige of a longer reading, whether expansive or original, reflected by the Lucianic recension, quote, and to redeem his vows and all the tithes of his land, end quote. Bar-Efrat writes that this refers to Hannah's vow, and Elkanah, being the husband, sees himself as responsible for its fulfillment, as seen in Numbers 30:14, quote, every vow and every sworn obligation of self-denial may be upheld by her husband or annulled by her husband, end quote. On verse 22, he will live there always. Hebrew Bible reads, he shall settle there until eternity, in Hebrew, Olam. Although this reading is favored by early translations and by most traditional and modern commentators, Rashi wrote that Olam refers to forever of the Levites. i.e., 50 years, as seen in Numbers 8:25. 4Q Samuel A reads, I will dedicate him as a Nazarite forever all the days of his life. A reading reflected by Josephus in Antiquities 5:347, while McCarter deems this as the original reading and writes that this was lost in the Masoretic text and Septuagint through homo euteleuton. Others, like Klein and Tsumura, view MT as the original reading. On verse 23, may the Lord make good his word. The Hebrew Bible reads, Yakom Yehovah et devaro. Yakem Yehovah et devaro. May Yahweh fulfill his words. Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A read, may the Lord establish that which goes out of your mouth. This reading is favored by McCarter, Klein, and Auld, but the Masoretic text reading is favored by Tsumura, who writes that Elkanah is saying that his wife may do whatever she thinks best, as long as the Lord does his own will, with word, quote unquote, referring to the will of God in general. On verse 24, 3-year-old bull, in Hebrew, parim shlosha. This can mean either 3 bulls, as seen in the Vulgate, Targum, and traditional commentators, or a 3-year-old bull, as seen in the Septuagint, Peshitta, and 4Q Samuel A. Most modern commentators favor the Septuagint reading and see the Masoretic text as a corruption of par meshulash. McCarter writes that as in Genesis 15:9 and ancient Mesopotamian cultic practices, the specification of age identifies the animal as of legal maturity for sacrifice. Tsumura, however, argues in favor of the Masoretic text reading and writes that parim probably means younglings, and thus 3 younglings. He writes, quote, it is reasonable to think that Hannah made a generous sacrifice to the Lord for the lifelong consecration of her son, who may have been 3 years old by then, end quote.
Okay, so am I understanding the discrepancy is they don't know if it's a 3-year-old bull or if it's 3-year-old bulls?
No. Either it's 3 bulls or a 3-year-old bull.
Yeah, the Masoretic
So
text
that
is
is
missing
the
a
discrepancy.
word. It's
No, you
literally
said
missing a
3
word, right?
You said 3-year-old bulls, like 3 bulls, 3-year-old. I don't know.
Yeah, the word
Something
years
like
is
that.
missing in the Masoretic, so it's
Yeah,
literally just
yeah.
3 bulls.
Yes.
It's not 3
Okay.
1-year-old bulls. It's literally just
And I
3
love
bulls
that the
because the word
commentator
years is missing.
I love that the commenter here uses the word younglings, which
Yeah.
I until this moment thought that was something made up for the Star Wars prequels.
Really?
Who uses that?
It is very. It's just old-fashioned English.
Boomers.
But it
Boomers
is
use
used
it.
for animals. It is used for animals
British
more,
English.
I think.
Yeah, British
Yeah,
English.
Okay.
A youngling, a suckling, a
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Now, young as he was, in Hebrew reads vehanar naar, literally, and the boy was a boy. Uh, most other translations and traditional commentators understood this phrase to mean, and the boy was still young. Kimchi notes that some interpret the boy was sharp, i.e., quote, he knew good and evil like the shaker, Haminael, who shakes akum from the flax, end quote. Septuagint reads, and the boy was with them, which McCarter favors and writes that the unintelligible expression, quote unquote, vehanar of the Masoretic text is a result of homo euteleuton. While this is also favored by Klein, Tsumura writes that the MT makes sense since the noun na'ar can also mean servant or steward, as well as boy or child. Therefore, the phrase the na'ar was young is perfectly legitimate, quote unquote, since na'ar can also refer to an older person, as in 2 Samuel 19:17. He writes that na'ar indicates, quote, someone of whatever age who was under the authority of another person and not free, legally, to act as an independent individual, end quote.
There's also like a story in the Talmud about how when he got to the temple as a 3-year-old, he was like made like a ruling or something about the sacrifice. And then the next verse where they're like, oh, and then they brought the boy to Eli, and it was supposed to be like, oh, to judge him for making a ruling or something when he shouldn't be, or something like that, like whether to kill him. And then Eli was like, no, you don't need to kill him, he was right, or something like that. Can't remember. I'm trying to remember where the story is. It's in Brachot 31b.
Maybe it's in Midrash as well. Maybe
Our sages
Midrash.
expanded with he Samuel ruled on a point of law that a kohen is not necessary for sacrificial slaughter, as it is stated in. Oh, okay, yes. I don't know if the story is mentioned in.
I
Talmud
think it
or
is
not.
mentioned. I think it is mentioned in Midrash Shmuel 3:6.
Okay, but the ruling that he refers to is mentioned in Brachot 31b.
Okay.
Okay.
Now on verse 25, when the bull had been sacrificed, if we follow the Septuagint in reading a 3-year-old bull, then this isn't an issue. But if we follow the Masoretic text reading 3 bulls in verse 24, why verse 25 specifies the bull, hapar, and what about the rest of the bulls? Kimchi, Gersonides, and Abravanel wrote that one bull was intended for a meal and the rest was intended for a sacrifice. Tsumura writes that the singular is used to denote the collective. And finally, no, it's not actually finally, it's the last verse on verse 28. He will be given over to the Lord. In Hebrew, Hu Sha'ul la Yehovah. Commentators note that play on the word Sha'ul, which is also Saul's name. Midrash Shmuel 3:6 reads, at the time the Holy Spirit flashed in her, saying, anytime Samuel exists, Saul exists, or something like that. McCarter writes that this, quote, raises the suspicion that within the narrative about Samuel's birth are elements taken from one about Saul's, end quote. Tsumura, however, writes, Stanley D. Walters holds that while it is possible that the wordplay in verses 27 to 28 was originally connected with Saul, in the present context, it was not a king, but a prophet who was asked, quote unquote, by God. If so, Gordon is right. Quote, the logic of the section that culminates in verse 28 would require that Saul spent his youth in the service of the Shiloh sanctuary, end quote. Such an association between Saul and Shiloh cannot be supported by the biblical text. He aptly notes that many scholars assume the original existence of a birth narrative of Saul here, quote, when no one in biblical antiquity seems to have thought to devise one for David, end quote. This kind of similarity does not necessarily support literary interdependence. The verbal form certainly reminds readers of the person Saul, but the name seems to be a common Northwest Semitic name, end quote.
Yeah, it's possible that this story that maybe they were both called Saul and then they changed it to Samuel to make it different. One thing that someone mentioned.
Isn't there a tradition in the Ugaritic that is more like his name is El for the same? I think I read
There's
that
a similar name.
I think I mentioned it. Let me see.
I sometimes wonder if whenever the Bible sort of like defines the whole etymology of the name for us readers, that's part of a redaction that's taking place where they're, in my opinion, burying the Canaanite connection to the prefix El in this case, referring to the Canaanite god El, perhaps, and redefining it so that it kind of buries that background to it.
Well, I don't think that was necessarily like an on purpose thing. Like, I think that like once like it was just kind of like a gradual shift in culture where they were still using El to mean more generally God rather than like the high priest. The high god of the Canaanite pantheon. Yeah. So like it was a slow transition, and it's not like they're necessarily trying to like, oh, let's stamp out these other religions. Like at this point, that would have been it would have been nothing to them at the time this is being written. So like they wouldn't have even been worried about El, like of the Canaanites. They would have just been still using that term because over the years, especially like during in my view, the first half of the first millennia of BCE, Yahweh was doing this thing that I like to call divine cannibalism, where he was eating up all the traits of these. I feel like I got the term from someone else, but I don't remember who. It was some scholar called it divine cannibalism, and I really liked it. But like as time went on, Yahweh was gaining more of a foothold in the area, and worshippers began using terms that were initially used for El to refer to Yahweh. So then eventually terms like El itself stopped meaning the high god of the Canaanite pantheon and just came to mean God. Same with Elohim, you know, it became to mean like the singular God. So I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, at this point they're, you know, trying to bury anything. At this point, it's already been buried.
It's already part of the culture.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, the long transition is much better written. Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader was too forced, too fast, and too stupid. Walter White into Heisenberg, that was amazing.
That was pretty good. So there's some media I actually know. I watched Breaking Bad.
I would say that the name explanations aren't redactions, because I feel like when you're writing a story and you give a character a name, you think about what you're actually like deciding a name based on the story. Like you kind of know this character and you want to give it a name that kind of shows that character. So I think explaining the name in the text would have been something that the writers would have wanted to do. To be like, this is why I gave them this name.
And a lot of the time they do that.
Yeah, we have quite a lot of name explanations in the stories, and sometimes we just have names given that are obviously like referencing the story that's going to happen, but it's not explained as it's not given. They're not given a birth narrative, I guess.
Mhm.
Are we ready to move on to the
I-
next chapter?
I have one final comment.
Yeah,
So
so me too.
yeah, on the final verse, he worshipped the Lord there. It is not clear who worshipped the Lord. Samuel, according to Rashi Bar-Efrat, Eli, according to Kara, Gersonitis, and McCarter, or Elkanah, according to Kimchi, Ditrani, and Abravanel. While the Masoretic text and Targum read he worshipped, in Hebrew Vayishtachu, Voket and Peshitta has they worshipped him, reading Vayishtachavu. And 4Q Samuel A reads she worshipped, Vatishtachu. And Septuagint doesn't have the phrase. Scholars are divided as to the original text. McCarter favors this 4Q Samuel A, she worshipped. Tsumura favors the plural reading, and Klein and Auld favor the Septuagint.
And the
And let me-
Septuagint, you said missing it completely.
Yeah, he doesn't have it.
Doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Interesting. There was one last thing. I guess it harkens back to like verse 1, where so someone in the comments asked a question. I don't know if they actually addressed it. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Maybe we should read that comment and then we can talk about it.
So Eric Wander says, was Samuel a Levite or an Ephraimite? In 1 Chronicles 6, it implies that he was a Levite. Elkanah's father was Kahath, son of Levi, or maybe I got this wrong. Help me, LOL. And then he adds a subsequent note to say the term lad, Na'ar, is precisely the one used for Isaac when he is on the point of being sacrificed, and for Ishmael when he is on the brink of perishing in the wilderness.
Yeah, we spoke about the word na'ar being used in quite a lot of senses, like even when the person isn't that young. But yeah, that's a question I wanted to ask. Tome, did we talk about the fact that it says Ephrati at the beginning in verse 1?
No, I don't think we did. No.
Yeah, it does say the
The Ephra-
yeah,
the,
country.
it says
country refrain.
Ephrati, but I think the intention here is Ephraimite.
Right. So if it's Ephraimite, and also, I mean, if First Chronicles 6 says that his father was called Kohath, that wouldn't make any sense. It definitely doesn't line up with here because we already have his father's name as well.
Well, the thing about First
Also, at
Chronicles,
the time, it wouldn't line up as well. If he
Yeah,
was
the
the
thing about First-
grandson of,
sorry,
maybe it's a different Elkanah.
the thing about First Chronicles is they often the chronicler often contradicts, especially in genealogies. he contradicts the narratives of the Deuteronomistic history. We know that that he used it as a source, but it wasn't his only source. I mean, it'd be kind of weird if it was, honestly. So he had multiple sources that he was pulling from, and one of them was this, and I guess he took some liberties, must have took some liberties, because there is the issue with not just this, but like in the king's narratives, there like someone is called like someone else's cousin, but then in Chronicles they're called an uncle. Like it gets
Yeah,
very
yeah.
confused genealogically. So I feel like the chronicler had the same issue we have a lot of the time, is following these stupid fucking genealogies.
Yeah,
because
this
it's
is
a
definitely
lot.
an example. This is definitely an example of Chronicles going really weird. So it's got the descendants of Kahath, which is the son of Levi. So someone who would have, if in the story, would have been long dead before the Exodus. Include Aminadav, Korach, Asir, Elkanah, Aviasaph, Asir, blah 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 blah, and Shaul is one of them as well. Uriel, Uzziah, these also sound like very late names. And then it says, the next verse, 25, the descendants of the Elkanah include Amasai, whatever, Elkanah again, Tzophai, Nahath, Eliav, Yeroham, Elkanah again, and Samuel. So, and so this is very weird. And then it seems to be that it is talking about our Samuel, because the sons of Samuel were Joel and Abiah. So those are mentioned in this book, right? Joel, son of Samuel, that's a character, right?
I don't even remember.
Or maybe
no,
not. I don't know.
think so.
So I'm almost sure there's like maybe when we get to Chronicles, I'll bring up the pictures that I found where it's got like almost like a family tree, and it's showing how there's like Chronicles says like this, and then this other place says like this, and how they're like, you can see where they've made the mistakes and stuff. It's very obvious.
Yeah, I mean, McCarter writes, let me see. He writes that this adjustment of Samuel's lineage may reflect the sense of theocratic propriety of the post-exilic community. In the present account, Elkanah is an Ephraimite with no specific priestly connection.
Yeah. The traditional commentators try and try and say, oh yeah, he's a Levite according to Chronicles or whatever. So like, how does that make sense? And they try and say that the word Ephrati doesn't mean an Ephraimite, but it means like noble or something.
Couldn't part of the issue be that, hey, this character Samuel is spending time inside the temple, and aren't there rules as to who can actually be in the temple? And if you're not a Levite,
well, I mean, he's a Nazarite, right? Like he's given over for this vow. So like they always hold like some special position, especially since you can't like be around like dead bodies and stuff.
Right, similar to being a priest or a Levite.
Mm.
No, but yeah, I don't know if that's the reason why they say he's both. Why it seems to imply that he's a Levite or an Ephraimite, depending on the context. Yeah.
Now, before jumping in, I have to say some Christian commentaries. Yeah, so Cyril of Jerusalem says that women should emulate Hannah's example by singing and praying quietly in church.
no.
Yeah. Cyprian writes that Hannah, who typifies the church, exhibits faith that the Lord hears the heart's cry through her silent prayer. And
What do you sing quietly?
You can sing quietly, don't you?
I don't know. You're still making noise though.
Yeah, I guess.
Doesn't Billie Eilish sing quietly?
I
Yes.
guess. I don't
That's why I just don't listen to her music.
Yeah,
I'm like,
me neither.
I don't know. Like that's just not. It doesn't. I don't vibe with it.
Yeah.
I saw her at an award show where they were doing where the performers on stage were doing death metal, and for whatever reason, the cameraman and the audience wanted to focus on Billie Eilish's reaction, and she's like,
Oh, shut up. Oh, and finally, Chrysostom says that like water on hard ground, Hannah's tears softened her infertile womb. Yeah. Okay, now moving to Second Samuel. Not Second Samuel, First Samuel 2. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I was a little confused with that too, because it looked to me like we started with only 1 Samuel, and now I guess we're going to read the sequel.
No.
Only 1 Samuel 2.
Don't spoil it. Okay, now this I warned that this chapter is quite long, and because of that, my commentary is longer. So read up to verse 10, including verse 10.
Through verse 10.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and it's too bad that we don't have Lilith today, because we have actual dialogue in a female voice. When does that ever happen? I mean,
Well, you
lines
might
of it.
it might be a shocker, but this probably isn't original to the text.
Yeah, I like
All right.
this part a lot. It's a lot of it is very familiar. They seem to have based a lot of like contemporary prayers. Well, not contemporary. but,
Well, then you read it,
Praise
Isaac, because I just feel weird reading you read
the
it.
song. Okay. Chapter 2. And Hannah prayed, "My heart exults in the Lord. I have triumphed through the Lord. I gloat over my enemies. I rejoice in your deliverance. There is no holy one like the Lord. Truly, there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more with lofty pride. Let no arrogance cross your lips. For the Lord is an all-knowing God. By him actions are measured. The bows of the mighty are broken, and the faltering are girded with strength. Men once sated must hire out for bread. Men once hungry hunger no more. While the barren woman bears 7, the mother of many is forlorn. The Lord deals death and gives life, casts down into Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He casts down, he also lifts high. He raises the poor from the dust, lifts up the needy from the dunghill, setting them with nobles, granting them seats of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's. He has set the world upon them. He guards the steps of his faithful, but the wicked perish in darkness. But for naught by strength shall man prevail. The foes of the Lord shall be shattered. He will thunder against them in the heavens. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give power to his king and triumph to his anointed one.
I'm glad that I asked you to read that, because I was reading the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition, and whatever version you're reading,
JPS.
JPS.
yeah, it strikes me a little bit better than the version that I would have read from. There were things in there that just, my mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your victory. How poorly worded is that? Yeah.
That
Yeah,
seems
I
Yeah, I
fine
think
to
the
me.
JPS likes to balance the literal translations versus this is supposed to be a song. How do we make it sound like a prayer or a song in English?
Gotcha.
And it's odd that you'd have dried for Chav. Is it
No,
dried?
derided, not dried.
Derided. Oh,
Yeah.
I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay. So continuing, verse 11.
No,
Then
wait.
Elkanah.
Oh,
you want me to stop that? Okay, that's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
good idea.
commentary.
I don't know why I thought I have to read the whole chapter in one go. Yeah, you're right. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is
it's
a
gonna
lot
be-
of these are pretty like generic songs, honestly.
Mm.
Which okay, so one of the things I want to note here is that note how it kind of starts in the previous chapter. And I totally see like the argument for like this or for that last section of the verse, like, and they worship the Lord there as being like part of
A stitch.
this. Yeah, like not necessarily a stitch. Like it would have been like, and they worship the Lord there, or maybe and she worshiped the Lord there. I don't know. And Hannah prayed and said. Then they have this little prayer, which is honestly like pretty generic. Like a lot of this stuff we find coming up in Psalms, right? The Lord as a rock. The Lord is a God of knowledge. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's very generic songs of praise. And we
In
get
terms of the
some
Bible.
some more stuff like he kills and brings to life, brings down to Sheol and raises up. It makes poor and makes rich. All this stuff is somewhere in Psalms, right? Of course, one of my favorite ones is "For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them He has set the world." But that's for different reasons. So
Yeah.
the thing is, if this as a later edition makes sense, because if you continue through, like you have like the sacrifice scene in chapter 1, and then you immediately go to they left him there before the Lord and went home to Ramah. Like it just kind of it has a lot better narrative flow, honestly. So yeah, this is often thought to be a later edition, pulling from perhaps multiple psalms, or things that were songs of praise that didn't have to necessarily be in the book of Psalms for it. But yeah, just stuff like that. It's very these kind of interludes are very common in early editions.
Yeah, there's
Okay, so
definitely
sorry.
similarities between. I just want to say there's similarities between some of the verses and Psalm 112. And I don't know, Lawrence, do you know what came first? I would imagine the Deuteronomic history is older than the Psalms, right?
Well, the Psalms, the thing is that, to my recollection, like it was compiled, over a long period of time. So like I think that some of the Psalms in the book of Psalms are actually quite old, or at least like are variations of things that are quite old. When they like repurpose hymns for, like Psalm 82, right, is like a repurposed hymn from from ancient fucking Canaan, that was then like adapted for Yahweh. So like stuff like that, you can say like, oh well, this kind of has roots earlier on, right? Like the earliest I usually see them being dated, like any single psalm being dated, is like around like the 9th century is usually the earliest I see it. But then yeah, obviously the compilation is far later, and dividing it into 5 books, right? The Psalter, right? You have the 5 books of the Psalter. The division was made specifically to mimic the 5 books of Moses. And I'm not actually sure how late that came in, or how early that was. I don't actually know if the Septuagint texts we have actually have that division, and I'll have to check. But either way, like it's a it's a collection of songs. So
I'm almost
its
sure the
final
Hebrew,
form, I'm not quite sure when it was achieved.
the
Maybe
Hebrew
in
book of Psalms, or Tehillim, is divided into. I think it is divided into 5 books,
yeah.
but then it's also divided into 7 days.
Oh, interesting.
So like
Okay.
you read this section on this day of the week, that sort of thing, and then you could also, people also do a thing where they divide it into one day for each day of the month, because it's a lot less it's a lot less to read per day, and it's also very common for people to have to choose a psalm which matches their age. So if they are 18, then they will say Psalm 19 every day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Although I mean, yeah, this isn't we're not quite there at
It's a
the
good thing no
Psalter
one
yet,
is
so.
100, and if you're 118, I think it is, then you have to say Psalm 119, which is like really, really long.
Oh yeah, that's the big acrostic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
so I'll start on verse 1. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. In Hebrew, Rama Karni Bayehovah. The word Karni is derived from Keren, which is generally rendered as horn, as in, according to the early translations, Kimchi, and modern commentators. Some take the horn as symbolizing power or strength, as in the BDB dictionary, Bar-Efrat, Klein, and Tsumura. McCarter notes Driver's opinion that the present allusion is to, quote, an animal carrying its head high and proudly conscious of its strength, end quote. He writes that while there's no denying this, the following observations should be made. 1. The allusion is to the growth of the horn itself. as we see in Numbers 23:22, 24:8, and Psalms 112, verses 9 through 10. The individual whose horn Yahweh has raised is conspicuously fortunate because a horn is a conspicuous eminence. 2. In some cases, the raised horn refers specifically to progeny. We see this explicitly in 1 Chronicles 25:5, as well as Psalms 132:17 and Deuteronomy 33, verses 16b through 17. And 3, regarding the referent of the expression, the allusion is to the prominent attire of the dominant male animal, specifically of the wild ox. Psalms 92:11, which is 10 in the Old Testament, which in the ancient Near East was a symbol of strength and virility. He writes, quote, "In summary, then, we may conclude that the expression exalt the horn implies a significant elevation in condition involving some kind of visible distinction. In certain instances, it refers specifically to the establishment of the lasting distinction of posterity. It does not follow necessarily that in the present passage, the birth of a son was intended by the original composer of the poem, but this is quite possible. At the least, the statement is susceptible to such a construction and gives a certain propriety to the placing of the song on Hannah's lips."
I'm a little confused because you say that Karen means horn, and I thought it meant I want to speak to the manager.
Ay, ay, ay.
I've always wondered if Karen had any connection to, like, if it was. I mean, it doesn't. Maybe it's not a Semitic word because in like Indo-European languages, like you have corner, horn, grain. All of these things mean the same, have like a similar meaning, and I wonder if it's just like a cognate or something. But it is interesting.
Mhm.
And
That's why it's
Lawrence,
unicorn and not unihorn, by the way.
and Lawrence chose that moment to.
Well, is it? I'm not trying to say that people like to use that as like an example of like, oh, all languages come from Hebrew or something stupid like that. But it would be interesting to know if this is a some borrowing from Akkadian or something. Not Akkadian, sorry.
I thought they all came from Adamic.
Oh, God.
Well, in the Jewish tradition, Adamic is Hebrew. And,
Okay.
And I'm guessing Muslims think it's Arabic.
Yeah.
Matt White has a comment, says Isaac Raskin is the first mention of hell / Sheol this far into the scripture.
No,
No.
we had mentions before.
Yeah.
Plenty.
In Genesis, I think we already.
Yeah,
had it.
Sheol?
yeah.
Yeah.
Sheol?
Sheol.
Yeah.
Genesis
Curious, I don't remember
37.
that.
But is this the first time of it being? It kind of sounds like it's an underworld as opposed to just the grave, maybe.
No, we don't. No.
This
we
still
also have
lines
this
up
in-
with it, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it brings down to yeah, because if we take the first part of the verse, you have the Lord kills and brings to life, he brings down to Sheol and raises up. So if raising up parallels bringing to life,
Yeah.
then killing would be paralleled with bringing down to Sheol. So that's still
Right. It
just
doesn't necessarily mean underworld. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, when the Midianites sold Joseph to Egypt and his dad was mourning, he says something like, "I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning," which I
Yeah.
take that
It
to
will
mean
kill
that he'll
me.
take that to his grave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very possible this is still just talking about the grave as a concept rather than an underworld where souls go and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think not. I think I have the comment. We'll see.
I'm saying if you just read it literally, it's not necessarily talking about an underworld where souls go after they die. It could just be, the body dies and goes into the grave, and then God can raise them up again from the grave, which is interesting because I don't think that concept has come up yet of God raising up the dead, right?
Yeah, I think that's a later development.
Well, we have the story of Elijah and stuff, but yeah.
I see another comment.
Okay.
All right.
Eric Wander says, where is it? There it is. Lawrence, will verse 8 be mentioned in your video of ancient Israel cosmology? By the way, The Pillars of the Earth is a mini-series with Donald Sutherland, who passed away 2 days ago. R.I.P.
Yeah, we've definitely got some flat Earth language in this song.
Yeah, we do. So I don't have this verse specifically outlined for it, but the thing is, if I were to do like an exhaustive study, I would not make that a video. But I do have plenty of verses. So like a lot of Job, right? Some stuff from Isaiah, some stuff from Psalms. Also covering some stuff from Ezekiel just to tie it in with imagery from Babylon.
Job, of course.
Yeah, the first one I mentioned, yes. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about quite a lot of things. I have like right now, like I'm writing my script for it, and the outline alone is looking. It's going to be about 11 pages. The outline alone. So
In defense, it
Damn,
seems
how
to
long
be
is
that
this video
mostly.
gonna be?
it's going to be fucking enormous. It might be an hour. Who fucking knows? But
Cool.
the thing is, I want to have like all the evidence or like the best evidence outlined, right? And I also want to address some counter arguments as well. So yeah, it's going to be quite a long video.
Somebody
The only-
posted
the only-
a comment on one of our videos that you're in about an hour ago asking about the work that you do outside of this show. They said something along the line, and I'm sure that what he does outside of the show is really good. And I said, well, yeah, his documentaries are very good, and I'm sure this one's
I
going to
appreciate
be.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully this
Uh,
one's a fucking banger because I'm putting
Yeah.
a lot of fucking work into it.
Probably will. Yeah, it's almost like the best thing that Flat Earth has done is bring attention to the bad science in the Bible.
Thank
Like-
you, flat
like-
earthers.
Yeah, then that's why you get people like Kent Hovind arguing with them, because it's like no.
So
can't-
funny.
You can't deny the science. You
So
can't say
funny.
that the Bible goes against science. That would be problematic.
That is so funny.
I mean, how else do you suppose God's gonna, keep a water tank above everyone? Like, how's that gonna just float around? I guess.
That's why I always plead that I want to see Kent Hovind debate one of these flat Earth weirdos,
He did
because
once, no?
it
Or
would
was
be
a-
it would be I don't think he did. I don't think that's ever happened. But the
or
funny
maybe he
thing
just
is,
talked about them. Yeah.
Kent Hovind, this would be the first opportunity that he would be able to win a debate
Oh,
using
really?
science,
Arn,
and he would still lose for two reasons. He would lose because of the shitty way that live debates are set up, so that the idiot can win. Where of course, when you have a chance to like read the other person's documentation, citations, or whatever, and reply appropriately, that's no longer possible. But then the other problem that Kent Hovind has is that there's actually three, is that his opponent would be using exactly Hovind's own tactics, which would work in this venue where Hovind's wouldn't. One last thing, and the Bible would be against Hovind.
Arn, I hate to crush
Science,
your.
which is
I
why
hate-
he would
You
win.
have the science. What?
I hate to crush your fantasy. He did once address the flat Earth, and he had one of his minions from Dinosaur Adventureland make 3 videos about it on the science on why the Earth isn't flat, because he couldn't do it himself. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kent Hovind could not possibly do a debate, a live debate, like what he does for a living, what he brags about doing. There's no way he could do that on flat Earth.
But he would lose against the flat Earth, because the flat Earther would be right about what the Bible says.
Yes,
Right?
but
If
he'd be
the
right.
debate-
This would be the one. I said this would be the one opportunity where Hovind would actually be able to have the science on his side. But the problem is the Bible is not on his side, and his own tactics, the kind of flim flam showmanship that he does, is exactly what would be used against him.
Yeah,
So
and
there's no
Hovind,
way he could win. He would
Hovind,
be right and still lose. For the first time in his life, he would be right. but he'd
I
still
don't
lose.
think Hovind's going to risk it after Greg Locke tried this and half his church walked out of it on him.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was oh boy, I am
He-
so glad
Greg-
that people are talking about this recently. So this video
Yeah.
has some fucking traction. Let's go.
Greg Locke made a big fuss that he's going to have a debate on flat Earth and why the Earth isn't flat, and then he had to delete it from his channel because half his congregation walked out on him after the debate, which he lost. No kidding. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever see.
But I can't see it.
Yes, because
Right, it's been deleted.
no, people have started posting it, including the part where everyone left the tent, which was the best part of the
I need to
debate.
see that. Somebody share links with me. I need to
I'll
see that.
I'll look it up and I'll shoot you a link.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do this verse by verse.
Are you done? Good.
Listen
So,
to you, Tomer. How you-
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to finish on your irrelevant subjects.
It's I think it's a bit relevant because we
No, it
we're
isn't.
gonna get to
So-
the verses where it mentions it, right?
Yeah, which we didn't get to yet. Okay, so on that same verse, my mouth boasts. I didn't finish. Okay. That's not the right one. I didn't say that. Like, it's Peter. For fuck's sakes. Okay. My mouth boasts over my enemies. In Hebrew, rachav pi al oivai. Literally, my mouth was enlarged upon my enemies, as we see in the Septuagint, Vulgate, and Peshitta. Some commentators see the word rachav as indicating mockery. Thus, Klein reads, "My mouth mocks my enemies," and Bar-Efrat compares it with Psalms 35:21, quote, "They open wide their mouths at me, saying, 'Aha, aha, we have seen it,'" end quote. Others, however, read the text literally. McCarter writes that the expression "stretch the mouth over," herchiv pe'al, refers to opening the mouth wide for swallowing something, as in Psalms 81:11, which is 10 in the Old Testament, and figuratively refers to the defeat of one's enemy by swallowing them. He rejects the reading of mockery since it doesn't fit with verse 25. Likewise, Tsumura writes that swallowing enemies seems to be the best fit for the parallelistic structure. Targum reads, "Let my mouth be open to speak great things against my enemies." Traditional commentators wrote that "my enemies" refers to Penina, according to Rashi, or to all those who mocked Hannah for being barren, according to Kara and Kimchi. On verse 2, there is no rock like our God. In Hebrew, ve'en tzur ke'elohenu. The word tzur is usually understood to mean rock, as seen in KJV, BDB Dictionary, Tsumura, and Auld. However, others derive tzur from a different root. Rashi, based on Talmud Berachot 10a, takes tzur from the root tzadik yud reish, to paint, and renders, "There is no painter or artist like our God who fashions a form, tzura, within a form," end quote. Kara reads, "There is nobody in the world that can make a form, tzura, of our God, for his form has a spirit of life," end quote. Some take tzur to denote strength, as in Vulgate, Targum, Peshitta, Kimchi, and Bar-Efrat. McCarter and Klein read tzur as mountain, based on the Ugaritic ger and the Amorite personal names, "My divine father is my mountain," and "My divine mountain is the moon." Septuagint reads, "There is none righteous like our God."
I would just say the first bit, right? There's no holy like God. There is I can't find the source of it, but that I'm almost sure there's like another version of like a song somewhere in the Bible, I think, where so this one is like there's no holy like God, and that truly there's none beside you, brother. But I think there's another one where it's like there's no holy like God, and then there's something about the sons of Amram. Have you heard of what I'm talking about?
Amram?
Or the son of
That-
Amram?
Something is familiar there, but I'm not
Or maybe
sure.
that's like a later, maybe it's a later composition. Maybe it's not in the Bible. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the source of that, and if there
I
was
think maybe it's a Dead Sea Scroll? I remember something like
no,
that.
no,
That's-
it's normally just a song, but I can't find like the actual song.
Okay. On verse 3, "The Lord is a God who knows." In Hebrew, El Deot Yehovah, literally Yahweh, God of knowledges. This term has been understood by Targum and Peshitta, followed by traditional commentators, as referring to God's omniscience. McCarter translates a mindful God and notes William H. Brownlee's opinion that the Yahweh should be translated verbally, and thus the God of knowledge makes things happen. Tsumura writes that the plurality of the abstract noun knowledge, in Hebrew deot, denotes its degree, not its number. The connotation seems to be more on the quality of God's knowledge than to his quantity. Thus, he translates, "The Lord is the God of true knowledge."
Yeah, it would be. The funny thing is, the Greeks also had that understanding because they were the way they used it was that God was the Lord of Gnosis, which is like that secret knowledge, like a higher form of knowledge. At least that's how the Greeks use that term. Which is why when it comes to like when we're talking about the Gnostics, right, the ones like in the know, they're not just talking about like knowledge in general. The Greeks had other terms for knowledge. Gnosis was a special, like divine knowledge almost. So it is interesting that the Greek translators used gnoseon, so like of knowledge, but of gnosis.
Now on
Okay,
verse
okay.
4.
The song I
Sorry.
was thinking about is it's actually called Mipikel, Mipiel, and it's like a whole long thing. Yeah, Ein Nadir is what I was thinking of. So it's a much later piyut.
Yeah.
That was probably which is anonymous. We don't know who wrote it.
Yeah,
I'm
probably.
guessing
Yeah,
they got inspiration from this song. And other songs.
I'm familiar
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also an acrostic. Yeah. Okay.
Does
Yes.
anyone here think that her praises here of Yahweh are a bit disproportionate to like what actually happened to her, which is she got pregnant? You know, like all of a sudden she's pregnant, and then Yahweh
Yeah.
is all this.
Yeah, I
in a
mean
bag of
because
chips.
yeah, but because if you recall in chapter 1, she's greatly distressed being barren, and then Yahweh brings her back like he brings her pregnancy back, and so I think it's logical that she'll be this like highly praising him or something.
Yeah, it's more or less this. The moral of the story is that if you're barren, you're like a dead person. When you get pregnant,
Yeah.
you come back to life, and
Yeah.
having children is like being a noble person.
Yeah.
Vindicated.
Yeah, you could say that.
So
On verse 4, the bows of the warriors are broken. Rashi comments, "This is the custom of the Holy One, blessed is he. He weakens the mighty and strengthens the weak. He sates the hungry and starves the sated." End quote. Bar-Efrat writes that the plural verb chatim, broken, is influenced by warriors, giborim, and thus hints that the bow represents the warriors themselves via metonymy. However, the Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A have the verb in the singular form, indicating that God is the agent. McCarter writes that this must reflect a correction, quote unquote, to chatim based on ignorance of the masculine plural form kshot. Kshot, a rare biform of kshatot. Tsumura writes that the Masoretic text makes good sense as it stands, both grammatically and stylistically. Klein notes that the bow imagery appears elsewhere in the Bible. Quote, "In Jeremiah, God promises to break the bow of Elam, 49:35, and in Ezekiel of Gog, 39:3. The Wisdom School held that God would break the bow of the wicked in Psalms 37:15, while the Songs of Zion celebrate the one who breaks bows and smashes spears, as in Psalms 46:9 and compare 76:4, which is 3 in the Old Testament. Hosea announced that God would even break the bow of Israel in 1:5, and bow breaking was to be part of the peaceful kingdom according to Deutero Zechariah in 9:10. On verse 5, she who was barren has borne 7 children. In verse 21, we find that Hannah bore 5 children. Together with Samuel, this means that she bore 6 children, not 7. And I like Rashi's comment. When Hannah bore 1, Penina buried 2. When Hannah bore 4, Penina buried 8. When she, i.e. Hannah, conceived and bore a 5th child, Penina prostrated herself at her feet and begged for mercy, and they lived and were therefore considered as hers. This is Rabbi Nehemiah's opinion in Midrash Shmuel 5:10. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says that grandchildren are considered as children. Some are of the opinion that the numerical value, i.e. gematria, of 7, Shiv'ah, which is 377, is equivalent to that of Samuel, Shmuel 377. Yeah. Kimchi wrote that the number 7 is a typological number indicating many. This meaning is found in the Vulgate, which reads, "The barren hath borne many," and is favored by most traditional commentators like Gersonides and Litrani, and by most modern commentators.
See, I'd say because it's kind of parallel there. Like, so the barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. So maybe the 7 there, maybe it has to do with like, because it always has to do with completeness, right?
Yeah.
So if you have like more children than you are supposed to have, like whatever like the standard amount of children was, yeah, I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely should not have 7 though.
I mean,
Yeah.
Tsumura writes that the 7 sons motif is popular in the ancient Near East, and the number 7 is used here as a poetic idiom for perfection. So even a
Right.
barren woman like Hannah would be able to have the ideal number of children. In fact, Hannah has only 6 children. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're supposed to, okay, so if you have like the full amount of kids that you're supposed to have instead of just having many, like 7 would be then more than many, right? But then even
Yeah.
then, it's still, you're still not reaching like the place where you should be, I guess. As yeah.
I mean, you can always say that this is figuratively.
No, yeah,
7,
yeah, I
not
know, it's
actual
a
7.
I did want to
Hyperbolic.
stress that the commentary that Tom I was reading before was saying that when every time Hannah had one baby, 2 of Penina's sons would die. So he wasn't saying she bared. He said she buried. So
yeah.
in case you misheard that, that's what they were trying to say, that she was burying her children.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Now on verse 6, he brings down to the grave. In Hebrew, morid sheol. He brings down to Sheol. Commentators note that Sheol is the common term for the grave or for the underworld, the realm of the dead. Tsumura comments, in the ancient Near East, the sun god is considered to be the psychopomp, the guide of the dead, in the death cult. For example, in the Ugaritic funerary cult, the newly dead king Nikmadu was sent to the netherworld with the assistance of the sun goddess Shapshu. However, Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth, that is, the creator of the sun in Psalms 19, is the Lord of the quick and the dead, who brings men down to or up from Sheol. He holds absolute authority over the world of the dead as well as of the living. Yahweh is the one who holds the key to Job's question, if a man dies, will he live again, in Job 14:14. While Gilgamesh finally gave up any hope of immortality for himself, Job remains confident, quote, I know that my Redeemer lives and that in the end he will stand upon the earth, end quote, in Job 19:25. Hannah affirms that same confidence in her sovereign Lord.
yeah, I really like the word psychopomp, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
What it literally means like the soul punter, maybe? I don't know. It's interesting.
I mean, psuke is right that
Oh yeah,
is soul,
psychopompos.
but I'm not sure what
Guide,
the other one
guide.
means.
Guide of souls.
That would make sense, yeah.
Yeah. Now on verse 8, the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. Hebrew for foundations of the earth is mitzuke eretz. The word mitzuke is generally derived from tzuk. Bar-Efrat writes that this refers to the mountain pillars on which the earth stands upon. Klein writes that God, quote, places the world on pillars which belong to him, end quote, and notes that this image appears elsewhere in the Bible, as in Psalms 75:4 and Job 9:6. Others read mitzuke differently. Kimchi writes that this refers to the righteous people through which the earth exists, according to Proverbs 10:25. McCarter and Auld render the straits of the earth, the former writing that this refers to the great rivers of the underworld and derives it from tzuk, meaning being narrow. bless you. He notes that the straits
Sorry.
of the earth in Israelite
was muted.
tradition. He notes that the straits of the earth in Israelite tradition were also the swift running waters where men were judged. Now on verse, kind of funnily, on verse 10, those who oppose the Lord will be broken. Septuagint has the following addition, quote, "The Lord is holy. Let not the clever boast in his cleverness, and let not the mighty boast in his might, and let not the wealthy boast in his wealth, but let him who boasts boast in this, to understand and know the Lord, and to execute justice and righteousness in the midst of the land." End quote. This plus is taken from Jeremiah 9 verses 22 to 23. 4Q Samuel A has a fragmentary plus that is different from the Septuagint. McCarter takes 4Q Samuel A to be the original, with the Masoretic text and Septuagint suffering from haplography and partial restoration. Klein writes that since the Septuagint here differs from the Septuagint in Jeremiah at a number of points, it must be concluded that the Hebrew copy of Samuel was used by the Septuagint translator had already been glossed. Auld comments, the fragmentary evidence of 4Q Samuel A, plus the fact that the Vaticanus and Lucianic recension are identical neither with each other nor with Jeremiah 9, demonstrates that the longer Greek text did not have the original Hebrew. Be that it, as it did have a Hebrew original. Be that as it may, the major plus appears inappropriately placed between the original components of the conclusion as preserved in the Masoretic text. And I will end this section of the commentary with a comment by Eusebius of Caesarea. Yeah, Caesarea. He writes, "These words refer to about the Lord will judge. These words refer to the return of Christ, or to the return of God to heaven. His teaching will be heard like thunder by all, and Holy Scriptures foretells his future judgment of all afterwards. And after this, it is said that the Lord will give strength to our kings. And this will be the apostles of Christ, of whom it is written in Psalms 67, quote, the Lord will give a word to the preachers of the gospel with much power, end quote. Here also, he mentions Christ by name, humanly known as our Savior, whose horn he says shall be exalted, meaning his invisible power and kingdom. For it is usual for Scripture to call a kingdom a horn. It is found also in Psalms 88, and in my name shall his horn be exalted.
I've got another one that you guys are going to love. One of my Bible exposition professors at DTS, Eugene Merrill, you heard of him? He's an excellent professor, and he writes in his commentary the following. He says, in reference to Hannah's song, says, "This is one of the earliest and most stirring poems in the Old Testament, so messianic in character, it is that Mary, the mother of Jesus, incorporated it into her own song of triumph, the Magnificat, in which she praised God for having selected her to be the human mother of Jesus, the Messiah."
So he believes that it was written by Mary, that song.
No, that was used by Mary. But it's
No, I'm
It's-
saying there's a song called the Magnificat or something like that.
Yes, yeah, that's in Luke chapter 1.
Oh, it's part of the Luke.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's sort of like when she comes out like all happy because, you know, she's having God's son or whatever.
Oh, and that rips off from here. Okay.
Yeah,
there's just the suggestions that this is
messianic.
Jesus is hilarious. Like the thing is, instead of
We're talking about
contextualizing it in a
Samuel
book
here.
that's instead of contextualizing it in a book that ends with actually I forget how this one ends, but like the
I mean, Samuel anoints Saul and then David, right?
yeah, and if we take this to be, because the whole point is like God keeps telling them that you're not going to like a king. Like that's a bad, you're not going to like it, but the people still wanted a king. So eventually they're given a king, and that is Saul. But then later, once we get to David, of course, he's far better for them. So instead of seeing this in like the greater context of like here is like the origin story of the kingship itself, and the high place that it held in society, and even to the close links it had with the theology of the time is like right there. Like the Lord will judge the ends of the earth, but he will give strength to his king and exalt the power of his anointed. And we consistently see in I think it pops up later in in the story of David that Saul had his thousands, David had his tens of thousands, right? And that's a recurring theme.
And also the thing about David being after God's own heart, I think, was another thing.
Oh yeah. By the way, yeah. So the bit at the end here, right? And he triumphs to his anointed one. The literal reading is "Who raised his horn." So is that it? He raised the horn of his anointed one. Homer?
What?
I was hoping that would be a euphemism for something fun, but I guess not.
What are you
The-
saying?
So the verse 10 literally ends with, and he will raise up the horn
The
of
horn
his
of
anointed
the
one.
yeah.
Right. Okay, but then we translate that to like give triumph or something. He will give
Mishicho.
power and
I mean,
triumph.
I think some say that this refers to like Saul or Samuel. No, not Samuel. Think
Yeah, to the kings or
wait a
whatever in
minute.
general. Yeah, we're not
Um,
asking. I was just wondering about the literal translation of like raising
yeah,
up the horn.
Mishicho. Yeah, Yarem Keren. Yeah, raised up the horn of his anointed one.
Yeah, you mentioned it because it came up earlier as well.
Yeah, I did.
It's not like raising up a horn, like a drinking horn.
No, I think it's symbolically.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Like aloof.
Well, Tsumura writes the metaphor of a kingly horn in verse 10b may have arisen from the depiction of the king as a wild bull.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. The aleph,
Okay.
the alpha, the aloof.
Hmm. Okay. Okay,
Who's
continuing?
continuing? Yeah.
Traditionally,
Yeah,
it's on.
it's traditionally it would be, but Isaac seemed eager. Are you eager?
I read the first part. If you want to read this bit,
Okay.
then go ahead.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
you can
I'll be
finish.
happy to pick it up from there then.
Sure.
All right. Then they left him there before the Lord and went home to Ramah, while the boy remained to minister to the Lord in the presence of the priest Eli. Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord or for the duties of the priests to the people. When anyone offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a three-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan, kettle, cauldron, or pot. All that the fork brought up for the priest, all that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the one who was sacrificing, "Give meat to the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let him burn the fat first and take whatever you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now. If not, I will take it by force." Thus the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for they treated the offerings of the Lord with contempt. The subtitle here, do you want me to stop there?
No, continue.
Okay. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. His mother used to make for him make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah, and his wife would say, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the loan she has made to the Lord," and they would return to their home. And the Lord took note of Hannah. She conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now Eli was very old. He had heard that all his sons were doing to Israel, and how they lay with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting, And he said to them, "Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, this is not a good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If one person sins against another, someone can intercede for the sinner with the Lord. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can make intercession?" But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to kill them. Now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and with the people. A man of God came to Eli and said to him, "Thus the Lord has said, I reveal myself to the family of your ancestor in Egypt when they were slaves, to the house of Pharaoh. And I chose him out of the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to offer incense, to wear an ephod before me, and I gave to the family of your ancestor all my offerings by fire from the Israelites. Why then look with greedy eye at my sacrifices and my offerings, and honor your sons more than me by flattening yourselves to the choicest parts of every offering my people Israel? Therefore the Lord God of Israel declares, I promised that your family and the family of your ancestor would go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me. For those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me shall be treated with contempt. See, a time is coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your ancestors' family. No one in your family shall ever live to old age. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared to weep out his eyes and grieve his heart, and all the members of your household shall die by the sword. The fate of your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you. Both of them shall die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. I will build him a sure house, and he shall go in and out before my anointed one forever. Everyone who is left in your family shall come and prostrate himself before him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and shall say, put me in one of the priest's places, that I may eat a morsel of bread. I don't know why that was so hard to read for me.
It's
So
not an easy read.
the one comment that I have is like, so this man of God, coming in, and an unnamed one, it seems. So this is a fairly common motif. We've seen this quite a bit. I think there was one in Judges as well. So yeah, this enunciation of a curse on the house of Eli at the very beginning of the Samuel story is introduced at precisely the corresponding place in the narrative as the denunciation and admonition of the divine messenger at the beginning of Judges in chapter 2. An analogous curse will be pronounced by Nathan the prophet on the house of David in 2 Samuel 12 and will be enacted in the subsequent narrative. So this is a very common theme for the Deuteronomistic historian.
Oh, yeah, I like that you said you had one comment. Meanwhile, I have like 11 pages.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I should start then. Okay.
Good.
Without further ado, on verse 12, they had no regard for the Lord. In Hebrew, lo yad'u et Yehovah. Literally, they did not know Yahweh, as in Septuagint, Vulgate, and Peshitta. Bar-Efrat writes that the term knowledge of Yahweh not only includes knowing, but also behavior in accordance with the moral values, as seen in Isaiah 4 verses 1 through 2, Isaiah 11:9, Jeremiah 9:23, and 22 verses 15 through 17. Targum reads, they did not know how to fear from before the Lord. Van Staldine Sulman writes that the verb fear was added because the original know the Lord had to be rendered more reverentially. Moreover, knowing Yahweh was only achieved either through miraculous intervention, study of his Torah, or through the fear of Yahweh.
And here I thought that God was angry with them because they weren't knowing him in the biblical sense.
How could you? Hmm. Maybe you hump the air? No. No.
What?
Okay. No, nothing. On verses 30 to 14, several commentators note that the priests are not following the Pentateuchal legislation. As as Klein explains, quote, according to priestly legislation in the Pentateuch, the clergy were to receive the breast and the right thigh of sacrificial animals, seen in Leviticus 7, verses 28 to 36. While according to Deuteronomy, they were to receive the shoulder, the two cheeks or jowls, and the stomach of any sacrificial ox or sheep in 18:3. At Shiloh, apparently, an alternate system was followed, in which the attendant would thrust a fork into the boiling pot and pull up for the priest whatever stuck to his fork. End quote. McCarter argued that the report here, quote, may be an authentic recollection of pre-Deuteronomic practice, end quote. Tsumura writes that such a cultic procedure, quote unquote, would have emerged out of the common Canaanite cultic tradition, while the people, including the priests, had forgotten the existence of the law completely, as later in the time of Josiah and his predecessors, seen in 2 Kings 22, verses 8 through 13. On verse 15, but even before the fat was burned, McCarter notes that the blood and fat of a sacrificial animal were reserved by regulation for the deity, as in Leviticus 17:6 and Numbers 18:17. The practice described here violates the prohibition of the fat to the priests, as in Leviticus 3, verses 16 through 17 and 7:31. Bar-Efrat notes that the conversation between the priest's boy and the to the sacrificer reveals the special emphasis that this degree of lustfulness receives. He writes that this shows that such conversations were common in Shiloh for a long time. On verse 16, Tsumura comments, we have the extraordinary situation where the priest, who was supposed to know the rules of sacrifice, was engaging in behavior that shocked even the ordinary worshipper. The fat was normally removed from certain internal organs and offered as a burnt offering to God, as in Exodus 23:18, 29:13, Leviticus 3, verses 3 to 5. In the Punic sacrificial system, that was the portion which the priest should receive, though, quote, the proper disposal of the fat did not have the same ideological significance as in the Israelite cult, end quote, according to Dennis Pardy. It is interesting to note that the Punic sacrificial tariff states that the oppressive priest who, quote, requires a fee deviating from what is set down in the text on this plaque shall be fined, end quote. Here, a lay Israelite protests this priest's freelancing approach, only to be told, quote, now you must give it to me, end quote. A demand backed up by the threat that, quote, I will take it by force, end quote. The short lines of the speech hint at the priest's growing irritation. The initial key now emphasizes the immediateness, quote unquote, of his demand. His forceful words imply that an embarrassing row will ensue if he doesn't get his way, end quote. On verse 17, they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. The Masoretic text reads, for the men, ha'anashim, spurned the offering of Yahweh, end quote, as in Targum, Peshitta, and KJV. Gersonides and Apophonel wrote that the men were Eli's sons, but others took the men to be the Israelites. Thus, the Vulgate reads, because they withdrew men from the sacrifice of the Lord. Septuagint and 40 Samuel A lack the men, and most commentators follow the Septuagint. On verse 18, a linen ephod. Commentators note that the ephod was a clothing worn by priests. For example, Auld writes that the ephod is worn or borne almost always by priests, as in 1 Samuel 2:28, 21:10, which is 9 in the Old Testament, 22:18, etc. David also wears such an ephod when the ark is brought to Jerusalem in 2 Samuel 6:14. He writes, quote, we may wonder whether the youngster's distinctive uniform anticipates a priestly role or a royal, or at least leadership role, end quote. McCarter notes that elsewhere a white linen, in Hebrew bad, is mentioned only as a fabric of priestly or angelic vestments. Tsumura quotes from Bud, quote, Samuel is thus depicted virtually as a little priest, end quote.
Yeah, it is interesting how like an ephod apron comes up in a bunch of little stories in different ways. But like if you go back to Leviticus and stuff, a priest doesn't wear one. Only a high priest wears one, and it's more like a colorful thing. I don't know where the development of that comes from. As you said, like you mentioned, like David wears an ephod. It could have just been seen as like a royal thing, like maybe this, something that you would wear while riding a horse or something like that. So it was like seen as a noble piece of garment, and then it kind of got adopted by priests. I don't know.
Okay, now on verse 19, a little robe, in Hebrew, me'il katan. The word me'il denotes one of the priestly garments, as seen in Exodus 28, verses 4 and 31. Kimchi writes that the specification little was needed, since the me'il was usually worn by adults, but his mother made him a little one because she loved him. Later, the robe will be Samuel's hallmark, as seen in 15:27 and 28:14.
The me'il is also only in Leviticus, at least, it's the high priest wears one, right? It's like the blue one.
Yeah, I just said that. One of the priestly garments.
Yeah, but priestly garments can be, the four garments that a regular priest wears as well, as opposed to what the high priest wears. I think me'il is one of the high priest garments.
I
Right.
think so. Let me check real quick. In the meantime,
yeah, it's definitely a high priest. It's a high priest garment. It's the blue one without sleeves.
Yeah. You're right. Okay, on verses 20 to 21, Auld comments, Eli's blessing in verse 20 is of both parents, but it is the father whom he addresses. Yet it is Hannah whom Yahweh notes, quote unquote, or counts in Hebrew pakad, just as earlier he had remembered her in 119. Just once more, pakad is used of Yahweh in Hebrew Bible prior to the conception and birth. Thereby the mother of the nation, Sarah, Genesis 21:1. Hannah's 5 further children are compensation for the one for whom she asked and immediately gave away. But though numbered, they remain unnamed, and attention quickly returns to Samuel in verse 21. We are told of his growth, and this could be a relatively trivial comment about a youngster growing up. Yet recognizing a further anticipation of David in BTH, which means the Book of Two Houses. This is the name Auld gives to the whole older story of the house of David and the house of Yahweh from the death of Saul till the fall of Jerusalem in 2 Samuel 5:10, and this time of Solomon too in 1 Kings 10:23. Septuagint narrows the implication to the growth of his reputation and renders gadal by was magnified. Now on verse 22, how they slept with the women who served how they slept with, isn't how? How they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The word for slept in Hebrew, yishkevun, is generally taken to mean they had sex with, as in Voget, Targum, Rashi, and Kimchi. Gersonides, however, objected to this reading, since the man of God in verse 27 does not mention this in his rebuke in verses 27 to 36. He follows the Midrash in Talmud Shabbat 55b, which says that the sons of Eli delayed the sacrifice of the women's birds, and they would wait until they would see their birds being offered. Scripture charges them as if they had laid with them. Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A lack this phrase, and most commentators see the Masoretic text here as an expansion. Klein takes it as a gloss from Exodus 38:8 and writes that it may reflect conditions of a later time. McCarter proposed that this interpolation may have arisen from, quote, an annotation by a post-exilic scholar who recognized in both stories etiologies of the ascendancy of the priestly descendants of Aaron, Tzadok, over those of Moses, Abiathar, end quote. Others, however, see the Septuagint omission as deliberate. Moshe Garsiel writes that the omission was done out of respect for the priesthood and Israel. Tsumura writes that this less than flattering information, quote unquote, is more likely to have been deleted than to have been added. On the women who served, in Hebrew, Hanashim HaTzovot. The term tzovot is found in Exodus 38:8 and is derived from the root tzadik bet aleph, which modern commentators interpret as to serve, and thus translate the women who serve. Sorry. Kimchi took these women to be the women who were about to give birth, who came to sacrifice at Shiloh. Klein writes that these were, quote, women who carried on menial tasks at the entrance to the tent of meeting, end quote. Tsumura rejected seeing them as, quote, Canaanite cult prostitutes, end quote, but rather, quote, those who performed menial duties in the pre-monarchical Israelite sanctuaries, end quote. Auld writes that the role of the women is already far from clear, and the context suggests that Eli's sons were, quote, abusing the women rather than availing themselves to cultic prostitutes, end quote. Voget has the women who waited at the door, and Targum and Peshitta has the women who came to pray. On verse 25, if one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. Klein comments, the real offense of the sons of Eli was the pressure tactics by which they tried to increase their share of the offerings. Sins against another person, Eli warned, can be mediated by God, but if one sins against Yahweh himself, there is no higher person who can intercede for him. The exact meaning of this warning by Eli is contested. De Wild construes the first conditional sentence to mean that God will declare the verdict by supernatural means when other means of investigating witnesses fail. Houtman takes the word Elohim in the first condition as denoting some outstanding person. Hence, a person may mediate interhuman sins, but only an intercessor of the rank of an Abraham or Moses could function effectively in sins versus Yahweh. McCarter understands the first condition to refer to the gods who will mediate for sins of humans against one another. The sins of Eli's sons have been primarily against God. They had been guilty of despising the offerings of Yahweh, so they are without hope. Their failure to listen to their father or obey him functions much like the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. It justifies Yahweh's death threat against them. Since they would not hear, he took pleasure in killing them. Yahweh's responsibility for negative or even evil actions is known from such passages as 1 Samuel 16:14, 2 Samuel 24 verses 1 through 2, and 1 Kings 22:20. For it was the Lord's will to put them to death. Hebrew Bible reads, for Yahweh wished, chafetz, to put them to death. Rashi wrote that their verdict had already been sealed. Kimchi writes that when a person sins with many sins, Yahweh prevents the person from repenting so that others may see his punishment and be afraid of him. Moreover, Yahweh already knew that if Eli's sons would repent, it wouldn't be an honest one, and so he prevented them from repenting. And McCarter comments, Yahweh, as controller of destinies, would not permit Eli's sons to heed their father's good advice because it was his, i.e. Yahweh's, intention that they sin and die. The theology of this passage, though distasteful to modern sensibilities, is by no means unusual in the Old Testament. This is the same God who, in the Exodus story, quote, hardens Pharaoh's heart, end quote, in Exodus 4:21, 7:3, 9:12, etc., rendering him unable to release the Israelites, and then punishes him grimly for not doing so. Here, as in the Exodus story, the writer's point is clear. The events of history are directed by Yahweh with specific purposes in view. On verse 27, a man of God, in Hebrew, Ish Elohim. According to McCarter, the term generally designates an oracle giver or a prophet, compare the Targum. Although this prophet is anonymous, according to Bar-Efrat, traditional commentators identified him with Elkanah, based on Seder Olam Rabbah 20. But some, like Gersonides and Abravanel, proposed that this was Phinehas, son of Eliezer. On verse 31, no one in your family line will ever reach old age. Hebrew Bible reads, Mihiyot zaken beveitecha. The word zaken is generally taken to mean an old man, as seen in the Vulgate, Targum, and Peshitta, followed by Kimchi, Gersonides, and most modern commentators, but can also denote a leader, according to Abravanel and Bar-Efrat. Kara writes, quote, there shall be no elder in your house, so that there are no high priests, for only an elder can be appointed as a high priest. The father's household, in Hebrew Bet Av, is powerful when it has an elder, end quote. The Masoretic text reading is absent from the Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A. On verse 32, you will see distressed in my dwelling. In Hebrew, hibateta tsar ma'on. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear. Rashi, Kimchi, and Ditrani wrote that this refers to God's dwelling. Kimchi explains, quote, just like two women married to one man are rivals against each other, so too are two priests in the temple are rivals against each other, as each one takes his share, and his eye is narrow, in Hebrew tzara, towards his fellow, end quote. Tsumura takes the phrase to refer to, quote, a shrinkage of the size of Yahweh's temple, end quote. This phrase is absent from the Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A, but is found in the Lucianic recension, according to Auld. Klein takes the Masoretic text as, quote, a corrupt variant of verse 29a, end quote. McCarter writes that verse 32a, quote, cannot be right, end quote, since it, quote, presumes that Eli sees the catastrophe which is to come upon his house. Properly, with the Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A, Eli witnesses only the death of his two sons, the sign of the latter catastrophe to overtake his house, end quote.
Yeah, it's actually crazy how many sentences in this passage like have differences between like the Greek or the Masoretic and like Qumran and stuff. Like it's actually kind of crazy how many differences there are. Like in SBL, it's basically every sentence in this passage. There's like a little note that says like, oh, this is according to one reading, but then another reading says this.
Got a couple of comments here. Eric Wander says, ephod, the Hebrew term, has a second meaning, a device for divination manipulated by the officiating priests,
Yeah.
like in verse 2:8.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
Okay.
thing that the priest had on, and they had like the Urim and Thummim on him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
the high priest.
Hearn Weber says, have you ever seen Moral Oral?
I did.
And would, as a lark / joke, ever consider doing a review series like here on something so silly? It would be fun.
I mean, you say it's silly, but it can be serious. Like, have you seen Alone? Yeah, that's a quite dark episode.
I've been alone.
No, but
In the
no,
dark.
okay.
Wait,
never mind.
what is moral oral for those?
It's like a
who have
claymation
only
from
only
Adult.
know immoral
Yeah,
oral.
it's a claymation from Adult Swim, which features like religious imagery. It's basically like a parody of Christianity, but it's very like distorted and very dark humor.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
I've
saw
been-
the original claymation. I don't know what it.
Like
We'll
Robot
call it a
Chicken or
cartoon
something.
for the moment. Yeah, there was. I can't remember what it was called. It was back in the early 70s, but it was a very religious programming. You know, some kid and his dog, and the dog talks to him and tells him moral lessons from the Bible, that kind of shit.
No, but this one is Adult Swim, and it's very dark.
making fun of it. Okay.
Yeah, it's especially the episode Alone. I think it's just one of the darker episodes I've watched. So yeah. Okay.
I will look that up.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. On verse 32. On verse 32, you will see distressed in my dwelling. In Hebrew, hibateta tsar ba'on. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear. Sorry, I think I've read this one. Yeah, sorry. On verse 33, all your descendants will die in the prime of life. Hebrew for will die in the prime of life is yamutu anashim. Literally, they will die men or adults. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear. Targum, followed by most traditional commentators, reads, the young men will be killed. Bar-Efrat notes another interpretation, will die as simple men, unlike the respected elders, who is mentioned in verse 32b. Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A read, your house will fall by the sword of men. This reading is favored by most modern commentators, with McCarter writing that the Masoretic text is, quote, obviously defective, end quote. Tsumura writes that the phrase die of men, mot anashim, probably means die by the hand of men, for Eli's two sons died in war, 411, and most of his other descendants died by the sword, according to 2220. He adds that the phrase be read as all the males of the house dying, i.e., all the priests will die in God's judgment. On verse 35, a faithful priest. This refers to Tzadok, David's second high priest, as in 2 Samuel 15, verses 24 to 37, who was Abiathar's rival and successor, and who supported Solomon, as in 1 Kings 1, verses 22 to 39. McCarter writes that the secure house, quote unquote, refers to the Zadokites, whose authority was made absolute as a result of Josiah's reforms. Klein writes, quote, by the time these verses were composed, the Zadokites were the legitimate priests in Jerusalem, distinguished from the Levites who are considered second-class priests in many biblical sources. Behind this arrangement may lie a long history of rivalry between priestly houses, end quote. And finally, on verse 36, according to this verse, the survivors of Eli's house are to beg before Tzadok for money and bread and to perform menial tasks for the Zadokites in order to survive. Gersonides writes, that was the rightful punishment for the house of Eli, to be a lesson not to fatten themselves, end quote. Bar-Efrat notes that some modern commentators, like McCarter and Klein, see this verse as directed towards the Levitical priests of the high places in Hebrew Bamot during Josiah's reign in 2 Kings 23, 8-9. However, he notes Moshe Tzvi Segal's objection that it is unknown if the priests of the high places were from the sons of Eli. That's it.
Okay.
I think realistically, the people who would be priests at the high places were not necessarily part of any tribe. Maybe later they were thought to be, or any like, you know, certain house, right? Because they were. It was kind of a very organic. It seems to be, from the archaeological evidence, it seemed to be a very organic kind of form of religion. So it wasn't like so streamlined, is what it seems like. So even if later, like as a polemic, they would certainly, you know, they would certainly add these things on for their own political goals, because, you know, by the end of the King's narratives, like that's like the whole, like that's like one of the main things that Israel did wrong was not take down the high places, right? So I could see that as being like the later polemic, but in reality, the high places would probably not have been so streamlined.
Okay, so we are saving. We're going to have to save 1 Samuel 3 for next week. I've got a couple things that need to be taken care of right away.
Snakes.
Sure.
No, but other things. Well, there's snakes every day, but there's other things that I have to do too. So we'll have to leave it at that. Anybody have any closing comments?
Well, I am. Oh man, if I'm lucky, I'll get the video done on biblical cosmology this week if I'm lucky. But yeah, I'm very excited to be getting that done. I'm not sure what we're reading on Wednesday, but maybe the Acts of Andrew or something like that. Just another apocryphal work on Wednesday on the Milwaukee Atheist channel, and yeah, gonna be doing a few other things in upcoming weeks.
Okay.
I
All right,
I will
and
end.
I'm excited to see that one on cosmology. I wish I could be involved in it, but I understand, you know, your methods.
Yeah, it's just basically just me having my face in books for a while, and then making a model to make sense of it all.
Lawrence, when Aaron asked if someone had something to say, I'm hovering with my finger over a certain button.
All right,
have
fine.
you
Also,
forgotten
join the
anything?
Discord.
Wait.
Because Aaron is in the Discord. You should join it. There you go.
And I should also
Great.
end with Origen, who says, like the priest Eli, who understood what sins could be expiated according to the law, the apostles and their followers prescribe or prohibit sacrifices for sins. Goodbye, everybody.
All right.